Oh shit, I almost went live. Whoops. I have started recording.
Okay. Hello there! Welcome to the ReZero podcast. I'm your host, Wolf.
I'm your host, Gold.
I'm your host, Connor.
And today, gentlemen, we will be talking about EX4 of the ReZero light novel. We have simultaneously kind of a lot to discuss today, and also not at the same time. It's weird.
Let's just flow through this. We're all in simpatico. Let's just talk about this. Let's get the vibe out here. We're gonna be up very front here. This wasn't our. Let's just say. I'm sorry to spoil this for everybody.
I didn't like it.
Okay,
I'll be honest.
Rip it off, and just say it. All right.
This was. I made this as required reading for these two before we moved on to Arc 8, because there are events that happen in this book that are relevant to that story.
Yeah.
And it is the most unnecessary reread I think I've done so far. Going back through some of the side stories we did in like our required reading episode showed me a few things I didn't see before, and I enjoyed getting that perspective.
Yeah.
All of this, the actual story involved, was the least interesting part of this entire book to me, because I feel like I already knew every single step that was going to happen, the results of all of it, how the fights were going to go, and the way that the main conflict for the first section, the first chapter, gets involved.
This was an interesting case for me, where I did actually quite enjoy some of the character stuff, especially seeing a lot of stuff from Julius's perspective, which I'm sure we'll probably be focusing on mainly today, because that's really fun.
Mm-hmm.
But the plot side of this novel was rather quite weak for me, I'm afraid to say. Not even having any foreknowledge of Arc 8 stuff, I could just see where a lot of this plot for the novel was going very easily, just from context clues of what I already know from 7. I think the only surprise I got was that Julius was the one that ganked Balroy, but apart from that, I just kind of felt where it was going, you know? Like, it wasn't trying... I don't think it was trying to do anything, like, out of nowhere crazy reveal twists and stuff like that. But it just didn't have the same draw to me as EX1 did.
Well, that's the thing, right? This EX novel, and I honestly believe that, this is just my perspective, I'd hope that, and this is the way I see it, EX novels are kind of made when things are so necessary to be written, even though they aren't particularly, important to the main story, insofar as you couldn't understand the main story without reading this. But at the same time, it gives so much additional depth and context, and there's a lot of juice to squeeze out of most EX novels, it seems like. This one didn't justify itself to me in that same way as most of the other EX novels that I've kind of framed in my mind has justified themselves as necessary. Because really, the plot here, it feels like, how should I say? It feels like one continuous scene at a point, right?
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
And that one continuous scene doesn't really give you much to work with other than the events that are occurring. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Sure, we get the characters' feelings and motivations, but like they're not surprising to us because, for example, in a story, yes, in a story like this, right? We know all these characters already. These characters aren't acting in a way contrary to our expectations. They aren't, they aren't telling something about them that we don't already know. And 3, because of their, status in the main story, there is a lot of implicatory, like, piecing together that you could do in order to, imagine a story approximate to this without having to read this book.
Yeah.
Like, I think most people's vague understanding of what would happen if you just say, Belroy Temelgov died, Vincent got kidnapped by them, but it turned out to be fake, and then you're like, okay, I think I understand how all the characters act in the situation, and you'd probably be right.
I think the biggest subverted expectation, I'll say, no, it wasn't even that much. It's just Reinhard didn't feel to me fully in character, this story. And I
Yeah.
imagine that may have been partly with like that restraint he had on,
Mm-hmm.
but there seemed to be this air of like cockiness about him that he doesn't usually have.
We'll
Typically,
talk
he's
about
very
that.
much like fake modest, where he clearly knows he's strong, but he acts like someone who doesn't think that. Whereas
Yeah.
here, he kept like getting grins, and all of his modesty felt more, it read sarcastic rather than uh
Yeah,
like self-denying earnestness. Like
Like,
there's a part of that. A lot of his, one of the things I noticed, and it was just hard because the word choice they used, a lot of his smiles were sad, is what they were kind of saying. They didn't use the word sad, but it's like a weird archaic word that's like old, but it means like sad and limp, you know? So I think like that, a lot of his smiles were like him putting on an attitude, but it wasn't like actually him being as cocky. I kind of noticed that. I was like, what does that word mean that they're trying to say? And then I looked it up, and it means that pretty much, limp and sad. Like, so yeah, I got that part of it, but I know what you're saying, and I think I have an idea for why that is, and it's in a context that I feel like might be, I wouldn't say like revisionism, but it might be a part of Tepe's writing of Reinhard that has implications for the later story that I think we're going to get. And this is just my theorizing, but we'll get to it when we
okay,
get to it.
interesting. I'm really curious to hear your perspective on that then, Gold.
Yeah. But yeah, I think like the juxtaposition of, and we can talk about it now actually, just like quickly. Actually, it's like one topic, which is I really dislike Cecilus, but that's the point, I think.
yeah, it
Right.
actually
Yeah.
is.
Oh,
Yeah.
you're not supposed to like him.
He's supposed to be an annoying character to like everybody hates him around him. So like that's a part of it too.
Mhm.
Like nobody likes him at all. He's very, I mean, egotistical to like a fault. Like that's the point, right? The Valachian Empire is built on egoism, right?
Yeah.
And
Built on using her strength to take power and be powerful when he is already powerful but doesn't feel the need to use his strength to increase like his station
Yeah.
at all.
yeah,
Which is kind of a cool character thing they do with him, that he felt like he couldn't do so because he was already on top until he interacted with Reinhard.
Reinhard, yeah. And,
right, something on his level. Yeah.
and on that topic, I guess that was one of the elements of this novel that was compelling for me, I think. In that,
Yeah, I think Ceci was one of the better parts of, or rather, this was one of the better
Ceci.
enjoyed Ceci
Right.
yeah,
times compared to the kid version we've got.
we've got so far.
Yeah, I think the framing of the real thing that I kind of understand now is that Ceci, he's supposed to be a counterpart, a juxtaposition to Reinhard,
Yeah.
in a sense where the character does not work if he's not implicated in that, right?
Yes.
I think something that's going to be very compelling later on, is just my idea, is when Heinkel interacts with Ceci, because then he starts seeing the pair, like anything around that makes the character make sense to me.
Yeah,
like fit
exactly.
very well. Like I think I'm like, okay, I get what they're trying to do. So when he's being annoying here, I'm like, yeah, okay, sure. He's with Reinhard. His entire thing is to be Reinhard's rival in quotes, but that's only his own perspective. Reinhard doesn't care about those things, right?
Reinhard clearly does not see him as an equal in this
Yeah.
at all. He treats
Yeah.
him the same way that he treats anybody else. The only difference is he was able to pull the sword out against him.
Yeah.
Right. With his two best served. Yeah.
And
Yeah, that's actually fair. It may have been pulled up against the swords rather than against him. That's interesting.
yeah,
Yeah.
because
He's the best sword wielders. Yeah.
they would be on the same level of those of his sword as an elemental, one of the 8.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I have a theory about that too in a second. This is just a theory that I've always had, which is
Yeah, go ahead.
go.
the idea that the Dragon Sword raid, they talk about made by an unnamed smith. I think I've talked about this before. I honestly think that the dragons made this sword, or it's made of a dragon.
Well,
that makes sense.
In like that little prologue bits to chapter 2, it mentions that it's been infused with the power of all the dragons that it's slain.
Right, that makes sense. So it's like a
We know that like dragons are just giant bodies of mana in the shape of huge beasts. It makes sense that the sword gets powerful by taking that in.
Yeah, and it would also explain why it's so powerful too, because we know Reed killed a lot of dragons in his time, right?
Yep.
So that adds to that mystique of like, wow, the world 400 years ago is so different to our, I don't know how to say, modern understanding of the ReZero world, right? And it just adds. I love that Tapei always finds a way in his world building to sneak in a wow, like the more ancient world of ReZero. There's some stuff there that's just so cool.
Oh, that's actually something I did think was neat that we got like super uh half-handedly or offhandedly by the random guard who's definitely the one who's now in charge of looking after Sirius in the main story. I thought that was a neat bit of foreshadowing
Oh
because he got sent off
yes,
to a jail. That he mentions that there's been conflict between Lagunica and the Empire for 1,000
1,000
years.
years. Yeah, that.
Yeah,
Which,
even beforehand, yeah.
yeah, so that goes back to when it was like the Lion Kingdom.
Yeah,
And I remember that, yeah.
We knew it was like it went back to the Lion Kingdom before. We didn't know like how far that stretched back. 1,000 years of history. That's like a whole new paradigm that we didn't see before. I was expecting it to be more like another 300 years or so, but you
wonder
add that
if that's
1,000
when, like,
number. That's crazy.
I wonder if that's when the like original witches that Tappe said there used to
Yeah,
be, like the setting
Right.
before the ones we have
It'd be
now.
it would kind of be the age of witches, right? Almost.
Well, before that, so like the
Yeah.
witches' age is like the 400 years ago.
Yeah,
But, like
and-
he said, there were like ancient ones before them.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if like that's around the same time frame.
Maybe
Well,
maybe be the age of dragons. Maybe at that time.
yeah, partially, I think. Also, a thing is as well is that like thing that we're going to get, or I don't know if we've already got it, that the capital's palace is around that old. It's like thousands. It's like 1,000 years old. So it's like an ancient thing, even past the witches. So like the foundation of the empire and the Lion King is around the same time. So they've been around for very, very long.
It also adds another, especially considering not only is the Lagunican royal family gone, but also the way the Empire is so different to how it seems to have been in the past, especially under Vincent's leadership, that it really makes you think that they kind of really disconnected from this ancient history they once had in a lot of ways, right?
Well, I think there's that.
Other or
Is in like their own histories, I think.
Yeah,
Especially the kingdom.
Vincent's the one that's kind of bringing it back to the old
a bit.
ways.
With
he's
the
returned
generals.
the 9
Yeah.
divine generals to the fold.
Yeah, one thing that I kind of thought about is that, I think this is not only implied, but it's pretty much stated that, like the world's history past 400 years is very vague to people. Like even the wisest of people, they don't really know too much because, I mean, imagine half of Earth was destroyed in shadow, right? And that used to be a part of everybody's life. But so much death and destruction, so many people migrated here or there, and then the fear of the witches at the time, there was devastation even in the world that remains.
Well, the source of history is really limited here because, like, the only two libraries that we know that exist in this world are the books of the dead that get magically generated, and everything that Echidna wrote and then was put into the Roswell family library,
And
the
now-
Forbidden Library, which have now all been burned
Cooked.
away.
Yeah. And this is another interesting element where I'm thinking about when did Ode Laguna come in? Is now because I'm thinking of this also in terms of like in terms of oral history or remembered history passed down through like generations and families. Do you think Ode Laguna could have in some way, like if it became a thing at a different point in time, maybe around this 400 years ago, as like a response to the Satella thing? Do you think that's influenced people's history?
I think it's
ideas?
probably just started
stated.
getting involved then.
Yeah, it stated that it was involved then. Yeah, like blessings didn't exist until 400 years ago.
Yeah.
But, like that was stated. I think it was meant to be a counterbalance from the world to combat authority users.
That's from Stride, right?
Yeah, he said that, and I think that was quoted in Arc 7 at the end.
With his diaries. or
Stride.
something?
Yeah, his
Yeah.
diary. Yeah. So I think like that, idea that the world that goes into what I'm going to be talking about with the thing that I have about Reinhard is that I honestly believe, and this is just my opinion, that there's going to be an ironic twist to the way in which, Reinhard's fated kind of operate in the story is that we've talked about this before, he is by all means a puppet, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
A puppet by the kingdom and then the puppet by fate, right? the juxtaposition of that to the person who thinks that he is equals Cecilus, who thinks that he is the main character, who instead of who instead of like accepts fate. He's like, I'm fated to be the main character, right? And even like people kind of like one of the things that like I think Julius or even it was Ferris probably joked about like, no, if anybody would be the main character, it'd be Reinhard, right?
Yeah.
And that is probably how the world sees Reinhard, right? Like the world sees Reinhard as the fated champion that will vanquish the evil that plagues it. That is his role, essentially.
The world is trying to make him that, even though what we really see is the main character is in fact Subaru.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we know that as the
It's
audience.
the better thing,
But
right?
he's the one that's really changing and affecting fate with all of it. Like,
But-
so
True.
even with that concept, it's him that's doing it all.
But in that vein, it very much feels like to me, it's almost fated, tragically, that Reinhard is going to be in opposition to Subaru at some point.
Yes, because the designs of the world is not the designs of the like that sounds ridiculous, but it's like the designs of the world of ReZero is counter to the meta designs of, so like by necessity they have to be opposed at one point or another, because what the world wants can never be Reinhard saving this world, because it isn't his he's not like that isn't his will. That is the will of the natural law of things, whereas this story is a story about people, right? The story about Subaru.
Because just because he's the hero, capital, right, doesn't necessarily mean he's going to be the hero that saves the day.
Yeah, I don't actually think he's going to be necessarily opposition to Subaru. I think that he's going to be in a position where he's supposed to be, and then Ode Laguna strips him of his powers.
Oh,
and
that's
where
going to
we
be
get,
the breaking
like,
point?
Wilhelm
Yeah.
flash forward of you can't even pick up the sword without it, thief.
Yeah.
But honestly, we're getting off track with better story. This is for EX4.
We're coping a bit too much here from the little driblets we got.
Yeah, we're talking about
What I want you to remember, Goal, is just that idea of like Cecilus trying to make himself the main character and believing that he is when Reinhardt's kind of denying that he's supposed to be. Keep that in mind through Arc 8. I want to make you like make a point of remembering that.
Yeah, I'll definitely. It's something on my mind when I think about Cecilus, anyways. So that's sort of the cool part about it. Speaking of the generals, we could talk about how they. We could talk about how they came here. It's pretty simple. They're like, "Hey, come here for a diplomatic mission," and they're like, "Really? Yeah, bring two of the sages, right? Sages. It's something that we talked about before a little bit vaguely.
It's a translation thing.
Yeah, it's
a translation thing,
right? Well,
yeah, wise men more. It doesn't really matter.
It referred to Shala's sage name here as the Great Sage. In the version I had.
Yeah, that makes sense. And yeah, pretty much like even if that wasn't the case, it'd be kind of funny if there was just like a little bit of a a play on that. But either way, they brought them to the capital, Ljubljana, right? This was called.
And I just want to point out that I think it's really cool that one of the Council of Wise Men is in fact a giant.
Yes.
I don't think we've realized that it's not just humans.
I really thought he was just a human, but it does seem he's a giant, right?
Yeah, they refer to him as standing. It's like a massive size difference when they're both standing up, but when they're seated and speaking, it's Miklatov that seems greater.
Which adds an interesting minute to how much he hates Rom, eh?
Yeah, self-hating, that type of thing. I think like one of the interesting parts is, I actually like that character. I forget what his name is, the second minister. Like even, I think like he had a lot of like good wry lines this time around.
Yes,
which makes him more than just a one-dimensional character than before, which is like sort of like racist and like bigoted.
It separates him out a little bit from also from Miklatov and being like this other sage here.
He's not afraid to say his words. He's very confident, even when he's addressing an empire of a different nation. It's and
I genuinely think, in my opinion, the most interesting part of this novel is that beginning section. With
100% agree. I was so excited to read this because like months and months ago, I had been like I brought EX4 to work to read through for some like long drawn out points when I didn't actually have anything else to do. I just had to sit in front of a computer. And I read like that first section basically up until the Reinhard and the blood room scene.
Yeah.
And I had been really enjoying them. Just like, this is really cool. We're getting like from more in-depth talk about the sages. We're getting everything from Julius's point of view, who obviously I enjoyed and wanted to see more of that. And just having since read Arc 8, everything past that just didn't hold up to that beginning.
Because what I really did enjoy about this beginning section, right, is one thing I think that's been really cool about ReZero's world building, and I'm hoping we see a bit more, is the political element of it. Like, understanding the political perspective of the Empire and the Kingdom at this point in time during the interregnum period for the Kingdom, and how war for both of these nations right now would be a terrible idea, but if they don't, like, put on the face of being strong and being able to fuck each other up at any point, politically that would be disastrous for them, right? So it adds this really cool song and dance moment, and because Vincent is so competent, when you see Miklatov and Bordeaux like smacking around with him politically and diplomatically a bit, it not only adds a really cool world building element and adds an extra dimension to these characters that were a bit more one note before, I think.
Speaking in code by quoting not Shakespeare.
Yeah. And then, but this also adds the other element of it adds character to our perspective character, Julius, because of the way he reacts to this scene, right? Especially with the execution of that one soldier and how Felix reacts to that. All of this beginning stuff was really, really cool. I liked it a lot.
Yeah, I think this story, to your point, is, like, when this story started, and I think this is something that ReZero, I think one thing about this book that I felt like was unnecessary is we did not need this one drawn-out scene. I think the story would have served better with that being more succinct.
Yeah,
but there's a lot of things in this book that feels like unduly succinct, like the fight at the end, like some of the things where they're like, and then this happens, and then that happens, and then it's like one paragraph.
Like when we left Geuse versus Regulus in the flashback, where you kind of get to see the beginnings of it, but not ever really the whole thing you want to get from it.
And it feels like it's a point of like where we're focusing here is where what I don't want to see, what I don't need to see, because I can figure that out through context or through my own like knowledge of the story. Because let's be honest, if you're reading an EX novel, you're probably a pretty big ReZero fan, right? So you kind of these characters pretty well. So unless you're doing a big plot twist, what I want to see really is the cool stuff that I wouldn't be able to see, like that fight at the end, right? Or
right.
I wonder if, as a reader, you don't really know who Vincent is yet. If the revelation that the whole thing was orchestrated by him would come as more of a surprise and make the rest of it more appealing.
I suppose so.
And to add further context to this did come out before Arc 7, right? Like,
at least it was written before Arc 7 was done.
So it kind of has that feeling of, I think maybe as a reading experience, it might have been better.
Yeah.
If I'd read it before 7, maybe?
It might be a thing of like, this story fits better in the context of when it was written. Like maybe these were his first ideas of who these characters are.
It definitely feels like a condensed version of the Wallachia that we've come to know.
Yeah.
Where everything went according to Vincent's plan, as it typically tends to do.
Yeah.
But it was also like a showcase of what did we get? 7 of the 9 divine generals.
I mean, we got Groovy. We haven't got Groovy yet in Arc 7.
Yeah, you got Groovy and you got Nogoro in like a more personal
form. Yeah.
Yeah.
Got more Gauze Ralph on, and I was so sad we was just told to shut up.
Yeah.
I'm like, no, let him talk.
Right?
Well, Vincent was so rude to my boy. I was like, Vincent, you shut up.
Well, you never knows who's truly the most loyal around you until times get tough, I think like another thing that I was going to mention is getting all these characters, maybe would have been better if you didn't have Arc 7. So something that I thought about this was just like, it would have been, to your point, it would have been nice if a lot of the story had more of a B plot in the beginning, to a extent of like, here is the conflict between, somebody thought that Reinhard killed the guy, they're fleeing, but maybe just like one plot point beforehand that's like, they're in the capital and they meet this person at the capital, and it's a merchant or something, and they're talking about this conflict going in. What's this thing with stargazers? What's this thing with what? Like even just something like interesting that's about like the lore, like a bit more deeply about maybe how the Empire manages things, about like how the laws are passed. Like it could be something weird like that, like how governance is done here.
I think
Like
it would have been interesting if they had met Vincent out in the city before, like if it was just Julius and Felix, for example. They meet
yeah,
and interact with Vincent, don't know this is the Emperor immediately. And then when they get to the throne room, they're speaking with Chisha, who is acting as Vincent's
Vincent,
bodyguard
yeah.
for this plot.
Which he
And then
notably
Vincent is
isn't.
out and safe. Yeah, which is, but when he walks in, like, oh, it was Chisha the whole time, it makes a lot of sense. He got his arm blown off. And it was like, no, it was actually
Vincent.
like,
and Trisha was
why
like,
even
why
introduce this here?
because they want to tell you that there is a guy who is. But that's the thing, right? I think in context, storyline wise,
Chisha gets a better introduction in the
I know.
second chunk of the story as the diplomat coming in
Yeah,
and
yeah.
the one underestimated.
And
I honestly, I mean, this is just the only thing that I can actually say about this, which is like we have to think about this framing wise, perhaps. And I think we've talked about Arc 7 before, in the way it feels like there was like a revelation in between Arc 7 where he was confused on what he was writing, right? And I think that this book serves as a showcase of that, where he's like, who are the like do I need to write these characters
know who
in
they
this
are.
scenario so I actually feel like I understand the themes of the Empire, that I understand what the conflicts are like here, what the characters, what their attitudes are, I think he really wanted to get Vincent's character down in this story. I think he did a good job.
Vincent felt wholly 100% himself
Yeah,
in
in
charge,
character.
wholly in control of the whole situation. Like, just to go over his plot, he sent a trusted general to find and root out agents who were actively working against him, figured out an entire plan. Once he discovered it, found another excuse to to deal with his burgeoning issue with Lagunica, bring people in, get a better understanding of it all, set up a further scenario that lets him test his own generals against the finest knights that Lagunica has to offer, go word for word in a like verbal diplomatic sparring match with their current leaders, and finish the entire thing with removing a pesky general, getting rid of an entire planned civil war against him, earning the trust of Lagunican's officials, testing everyone against him, testing Cecilis, his best weapon, against their best weapon, and gets an armistice against Lagunica in a way that makes both countries look good to themselves.
yeah, exactly. And
Like, it's a brilliant plan.
it works out, and I think it very much truly is Vincent here, right, through and through. My curiosity here is I really there was that interesting element where I think we get a small bit of time with where it's Vincent's POV right at the end of this first plot here, right? And he's thinking about how, and now the revelation that Balleroy's motivation is to avenge the guy that Reinhard killed in EX1. And when he's like, oh yeah, I kind of wish he could have done that. Like, he could have done that. And I'm just thinking, whole ass, Reinhard was kind of, he could have been in danger here if things had gone a little differently, I think, genuinely.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I think the collar probably is part of it.
Yeah, part of
Yeah,
it,
but they explained the 2 divine protections he has that would have rendered Balleroy's entire attack strategy useless.
Yeah.
It would have just been a perpetual stalemate until Balleroy got tired or Reinhard found a way to get to him.
Yeah. 100%. Because Reinhard doesn't really get tired. That's like the thing.
That's his thing.
And he has the divine protection of like the first sense that because he has the reaction time to react to an attack he's never seen before, it tells him how to do it.
Yeah, and the second time you see it,
deflected an attack once, he's able to do it again.
Right.
Yeah. It's just it was interesting to really get into Vincent's head for a second there and really think, wow, like he if he could, he'd get rid of Reinhard. And I understand why he would, right? But it's just the fact that someone could think that in this world and do, like, just have, like, man, I wish I could, is like tall order, ambitious. Do you know what I mean?
Well, the way that we see the Kingdom Dispatch of Reinhard is only really shown at the end of EX1, where he takes out Miles, where he's basically just sent in as
the weapon.
like as the weapon. It's just a high precision missile.
Yeah, right.
No one
He
walks
takes it out of the
away from
sky,
Reinhard
yeah.
to tell the stories, so it's only just propaganda, quote unquote, from
Is it-
Ravnica.
Yeah, it's the same way in which, in this story, right? Cecilus kind of just crosses over, right?
Yeah.
And nobody can stop him because he's that fast. It's like the same thing with Reiner. It's like if you send Reiner to do a job, nobody's going to recognize that he even did anything because nobody could see him.
No one's going to survive. Yeah, okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
I will posit something to you boys, and I want to see what you think about this, right? I'm not saying I'm a better writer or anything like that, but I'm thinking, would the story have been better if we'd gotten less just fights here, and we'd gotten more of the drama and the politics on the Vlakian side, and then we got to see the actual fight at the end? I think that
what we
I'm going to just say right now, if we had seen the actual fight between Celsius and Reinhardt, the thought of actually getting it is cool, but I
wouldn't have think of it as
I wouldn't even imagine wanting to read out the extremely drawn out battle between Cecilus and Reinhard in a scenario where we know Reinhard is going to win.
Right. Because there's no dramatic tension because we both know these characters are fine, right?
Yeah.
Like in the main story. So it's like, if this was like, for example, Cecilus and Reinhard facing off at the end of Arc 8, like it doesn't happen, but like, if that happens and it's like, oh, these characters are both in peril now, then it matters, right?
Yeah.
Like, but we know that they're both fine in the main story, so like, who actually cares what happens here? In a similar way, I was thinking about this, right? Up to your point, Wolf, would it matter if there was less fights? Yes, I think so, because in my opinion, obviously, a lot of these fights are farcical. We keep the fight with Belleroy and Julius at the end, obviously.
Yeah, obviously.
The thing is, like, I was thinking about it, I was like, this story would benefit from one thing: actual character perspective from the generals. Like, I understand they're being used here, but
I'm actually going to posit the opposite when you're done.
Okay, you're going to say, I think we need actual character perspective from, like, Felix, or, like, I get what you're saying. Go ahead and make your point.
So it's not that we needed less fights. We needed the fights to be more personal.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it would have benefited more from having less fights. Absolutely. We didn't need the random attack from the insect tribe, or Groovy and Moguro
doing their
tag team against Reinhard in a battle. But if Reinhard had been immediately occupied or arrested by Wallachia, and the wise men told him, like, stand down, like, we're going to get through this the proper way. Meanwhile, Julius, as he clearly clued into everything that's going on already, grabs Felix, and they take Vincent out of the scenario. Yeah. And it's those three that we follow for the story, like, hiding out, maybe outside the city. And then we get one part where it's evading one of the generals. Then another, like, say, Groovy finds them with some technology, and his tools, like, end up causing a lot of problems, but Felix is able to resolve them. Mm-hmm. And then we have Balleroy coming after them, and we get the one-on-one between Julius and Balleroy, which was cool. I will admit, I knew exactly how that fight plays out. I still enjoyed reading that part.
I also posit this. I think it would have been really, really cool if we'd gotten one or two, like, new knight characters that we hadn't seen before. That came along with, just so we had some characters that we didn't know the fates of already, like, from the main story. So there could be some tension of, oh, maybe this new knight character. Now, we don't know if they're going to die or not, right? They could still be fine. But just that tension of, oh, a new character that could have their fate uncertain, I think would add a bit more tension to the story.
Mm-hmm.
Just someone to be, like, worried about. Do you know what I mean?
I want to go on a slight bit of a rant. To your point, I want to go on a slight bit of rant, because I think what Connor was talking about earlier makes a lot of sense to me, which is just like, the fight with Moguro and Groovy, and then the Insect Cage tribe and stuff like that. It feels like it feels not, how should I say? it feels not narratively arbitrary enough to make it like satisfying to read. Like the fact that they put those scenes in there when you're just like, okay, if you don't want Reinhard to be able to resolve this issue instantly, at least make it something interesting. Like instead of just being like, oh, Ryan has to fight these guys, that's why he's not fighting right now. And then fight these guys, that's why he's not fighting right now. He has a collar on, so he's a little bit weak, guys, don't worry. And it's like you could at least make it like Reinhard now has to struggle with implications of fighting back against these generals because he feels like he's going to kill them, or he's like, we have to just hide out, or maybe there's like a bit of vulnerability in being like, I don't want to fight these guys. Who knows? Maybe I'm actually weaker than I think I am.
If this turns into a wider conflict, I don't want to be that mass weapon of destruction that kills everyone from this country.
Or he's just not allowed to fight because that's going to be what happens if he does. Yeah, is that he would cause an incident.
Yeah,
so exactly. Just don't let him. This wise men just don't let him get involved.
I think that would solve a lot of the issues instead of it being like, okay, I get it. And the thing is,
it would also put a lot more burden on Julius's shoulders with the role he takes in this story. Right?
Because then Julius is like the leader. He has to fight. He has to prove himself. Like he knows that he's the third strongest in the empire, and also as by his admission, he says that he's like distant from the other two, right? So like that's interesting, by the way, the idea that Marcus is
we got a lot of cool stuff with Marcus.
Marcus is cool.
He's kind of grown on me a bit, especially towards the end, where we kind of get that perspective of him still being like this upstanding, chivalrous epitome of what a knight is supposed to be, that even Julius looks up to him for that.
Yeah, but also kind of bloodthirsty. Like that moment at the end where he's seeing the fight and he's looking at Reinhard, he's putting his fists together, and grinning and stuff. Like you get that bloodthirsty face. It's like, wow, this guy's simultaneously like the upstanding chivalrous character, one of the few beacons of chivalry left in the kingdom, like Julius.
He probably misses being able to like fight for a good cause instead of just handling criminals or minor disputes in the city, training knights who don't really take it seriously anymore.
Yeah, it's just probably why Julius has grown on him a lot, right?
Yeah. Oh, another thing I want to bring up to my point way earlier when I said the idea that they had some sort of like respect for the way of lacking culture. To your point about the nobles, right? They mentioned the fact that like, oh, it's true. Everybody in Lupagana, there's not such a huge class disparity because people who earn the right to live here all come from all makes and backgrounds. There's no like separation between nobles who are placatedly kind of tolerated by the locals because they are nice enough, but they are just, there because of their family, not because they actually earned it, that type of thing. And I thought that perspective was interesting. I think Julius recognized it. Yeah. I think that's because he has a sort of self-hatred about the way that he's been raised. Like his family wasn't like great or anything like that, but he feels like there's a degradation almost in the way that knights are kind of,
He's also like the lowest class of the three main knights that we have.
Yes, exactly. Because he's adopted, right? And he's also adopted from, I'm pretty sure, a branch of the family that wasn't noble.
I don't think he's adopted.
I'm pretty sure he is. If I remember from Arc 6, like he's technically the cousin of Joshua, but Joshua's from the mainline Aculius family, and Julius was, I'm pretty sure, a branch that wasn't noble and was adopted in. That's from what I remember. I could be wrong.
If I read that, I have completely blocked it out. I have no memory of it. I just know that he doesn't feel that he lives up to the standards of being next to genuine nobility like Reinhard or anyone else. And you know what? Maybe that does speak to why he works with Anastasia as someone who isn't noble by blood, but has worked her way up to being at that echelon. That might speak more to who Julius is as a person.
And that could also speak as to maybe why he chose her after EX4 too, with his experience in the Empire maybe, and maybe him thinking a bit more about that class disparity idea, maybe.
It's also a slot that he fits in nicely, where she needs that like physical prowess that he has, and that like key and tie into the noble family. They make sense as partners on paper, just not like
In the story,
personality-wise in characters.
Like it's very much a wow, this works on paper, but in the execution, there's something missing there, right?
Yeah, I think we talked about this before when we were watching the anime. I think the portrayal of Anastasia by the voice actress by the animators give a nuance to it that I didn't really remember in the text.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, I kind of understand that she's actually charming. She's actually kind of serious. Like she's serious and connects with people actually sometimes,
I think it helps that I don't imagine her as the size of a child anymore.
Yes.
Right. She's kind of
And
normal proportions. Yeah.
I think also the context of EX1 and how Fourier influenced Julius has maybe changed what it a little for me. I still have my gripes and problems, and I want to see more from it to fully see if I can get on with it, right? But I now understand a bit more why Julius would choose her.
Contrastingly with that, this book reminded me at least once why Reinhard is totally with Felt. His like undying philosophy that he's like the strong are meant to help the weak no matter what, like that I feel like there's something about it that he's almost like that's his mantra. That's like a spell that he's bound himself with.
And
Because if he doesn't think that way, then he actually becomes the monster everyone thinks he is. So he repeats that over and over again, whether or not he believes it. I think there's part of him that hasn't been convinced by it yet. I think he kind of puts on that mask as if he always believes it. But I think in this is what I was talking about, where I think Teppei's setting up something, right? I'm not saying he's exactly opposed to he's going to be evil or anything like that. But what I mean is that like there's a part of him that I feel like doesn't believe that anybody is as good as he is in like every way, right? I think he believes that he is that special of a person. Like deep down, like he sees it, right? Like he sees the way that he goes against somebody that's supposed to be his equal, and like he just knocks him out in one kick. He, like he's able to fight off anybody who trained their entire life, right? To be grand warriors. These generals are supposed to be the top of the opposing, empire, and is able to deal with them handily without a scratch. And that sort of kind of like ferments this idea of that, yeah, I am the monster that Wilhelm said I was. I am, all these things. I think part of that will leak out eventually, and we'll see it. I think
ultimately,
But Goro even says like it's three hits from him and I'm done, like 100%.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting, right, in that idea that maybe when I think the audience and the readers fully see that is when he kills Teresia, right?
Right.
When he doesn't he's no longer living by that mantra of protect the weak and care for justice. That is a pure moment of I am
Eliminate
strong, eliminate a threat, right? And I think that's the deep down true Reinhard, right? And regardless of all the things he may maybe wish to be or present himself as, that is deep down what he is. And that's what means he can only be the hero, right?
Yeah. He can't convince himself otherwise because there's nothing that has proven to him. Like we see a little bit flickers of it when he talks to Subaru or with like his friends, right?
Yes.
But I think even then he thinks this is just a momentary moment where they aren't realizing who I am, like they don't really see what I see. Like literally, like none of them can really see what Reinhard sees.
No one could read thoughts like I can, right? As an example, like no one can like literally determine someone's divine protection. Like, and I think,
well, someone else could, and then he copied.
Yeah, he copied. Yeah, but you know what I mean. Like, it's that idea that he had, because he can copy all these things. He's the only one who can, in that particular vein, do that. I think what I did like about this novel, in regards to that and the themes of the main story in relation to this, is that I like that it sets up the questions of Wallachia and like Lagunika's chivalry, Wallachia strength. We don't get the answer, but we see Julius ponder on it, and it now makes me think in connection with Reinhard and like his surface level belief that chivalry is about protecting the weak, but in a way, his is the tyrannical, like what keeps Lagunica weak, protect the weak, way. Do you know what I mean? Whereas
Mhm.
Subaru and Julius posit the opposite idea, right? And I think that's going to come into showing through the main story.
Yeah.
And that's going to be maybe the main conflict of the Lagunican central theme, right?
I think it's very interesting too, because in that sense, right, what they want, like what Reinhard wants, is to be the noble exemplar of Lagunican nobility, right, of their chivalry. But what he actually is in practice is like Cecilus, where he is just the strongest, and that is the reason why he's the most noble, in quotes,
It's
right?
not ideology, he's just strong, so he's putting the justification of ideology to make himself feel like he deserves it, right?
Right.
Well, it's not like Cecilus is the same as Reinhardt, though, in that he was just given ridiculous power.
Yeah.
Right, he
It's,
trained,
it's
yeah.
referenced here, at least partially, and this might just be my own knowledge talking as well. But he had to work for it. Cecilus did train to get as strong as
Yeah.
he is.
Yeah. In a different way. And I think it's actually interesting because we talk about the like contrast between Reinhard and Heinkel, but like Cecilus's father trained him and realized that his son was like that much like stronger than he was.
Him.
Yeah. Yeah, he was him, yeah.
And this, okay.
And Cecilus talked about like how his I think Cecilus talked about how his father like put him through like these awful situations, and like how like I think Kid Ceci, right, like talked about how his
Yeah.
father like made him do like crazy things, like
also mentioned
drinking
he's the only-
poison, you know, like
That he's like the only one who survived what their father put them through.
Yeah.
right.
And
Whereas I guess Wilhelm didn't even raise Reinhard like at all. Like that cuts off when he's like what, 6?
yeah.
Yeah, 14, right? That's what they said, I think.
Was it? I thought it was 14 years ago.
Oh, maybe it was either 14 years
So
ago.
he'd
or
be about
14.
8, I think, Reinhard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
When he was young, because like we saw Chibi
And-
Reinhard with middle-aged Wilhelm when it
And
happens.
to put it in perspective
in the
too,
anime.
Wilhelm also didn't have, from what I understand, much developmental involvement in Heinkel. Even like he taught him swordplay, but that's about
Right.
it, right?
Well, Wilhelm was doing the job of both Captain of Knights and the Sword Saint.
And the
while
Sword Saint.
Taritia got
Yeah,
to stay
exactly.
home.
Like
So
he was out
that's
buying
not
milk.
surprising.
But what I mean
Yes.
is that's
Will never said I loved you, you know, that type
Yeah.
of thing.
and it kind of interestingly, I guess that adds another through line you could say here of Wilhelm has more similarities with Ceci than he does with Reinhard, right? Like
I don't know if that's true because Wilhelm's made the point explicitly that he doesn't believe chivalry exists anymore. That he tells Subaru flat
chivalry
out
is
chivalry's
dead.
dead.
Yeah,
Right.
But Julius, in that next time that they go through the fight against Betelgeuse, proves the opposite,
Yeah.
and that it is still
Right.
alive and well and viable.
which is why Julius should be the future captain of the guard. Boom.
I
Obviously.
think it's setting him up to be. He's too similar to the current captain for
Yeah.
that not to be like what
And
the current setup is.
I don't think Marcus would ever choose Reinhard to be the captain, right?
Yeah.
He doesn't go to Reinhard for anything. He
No.
goes to Julius and Felix for things.
Yeah.
He admonishes Felix about acting more knightly, like the way that he wants him
But
to.
you could tell there's a level of endearment there, right?
Yeah, he adores the kid, and he trusts Julius implicitly, like to know what to do always. Like Julius is in charge throughout most of this book. He's in charge on the mission there, even though the wise men are like technically. Julius is the one that makes all the calls,
Yeah.
makes the split-second decisions, knows and understands, figures out everything that happened, and was able to understand all of it.
I mean,
which
he
is
takes the
really-
lead on Reinhard,
is.
even, right? Like,
It's great to see how competent he is,
Yeah.
even when he doesn't see it himself, and get to see that in an organic and natural way from his perspective through this book. That is probably the best part out of it.
yeah, and that's what I will mention is probably my favorite part of this book is seeing Julius grow a little and getting in his head a lot and realizing I understand why he understands Subaru so well, right? Like, because he has a very similar deep-rooted self-doubt and and anxiety and worry, and it really makes you think, wow, this makes sense as to why they had that initial disagreement, why they have that kind of rivalry vibe, but why they also really understand each other.
And why Julius also can clearly tell that Subaru's facing the same things, even though Subaru hasn't been able to pick that up on Julius yet.
Yeah, exactly. And I like And that's the element of maybe also Julius is a bit older than Subaru, and he's got that bit more of the wisdom on him, right? And now I'm just thinking, Julius and Subaru are kind of like the future of the kingdom, right? Like where they're the true ideological future of the kingdom. Subaru hates the empire, the kingdom's where it's at, baby.
I mean, obviously, I think his loyalty is pretty clear. I mean, obviously, Amelia is going to be the candidate for the ruler of the throne.
Yeah.
So that's necessary. But like beyond that, I think it fits his vibe better. I mean, he's going to learn. I think. I'm not sure if this has been explicated to him yet. Very contrasting. I don't think he's ever really dealt with it. Maybe we'll deal with it when he talks to Felt later. But like this idea that he's not really had to deal with this idea that the kingdoms are broken inherently at the moment, and I don't think he's ever been like, oh right, like putting Amelia on the throne is the first step to like solving all that, but I need to understand what it is that needs to be fixed.
He's coming into his ideological own. Because he's getting the opposition of, wow, I really don't like this empire stuff. So now he's figuring out, what do I believe?
But honestly, I don't have much more to say on this.
Yes, same.
It's kind of very mediocre for what Tepe's writing. It's definitely not the worst thing he's done.
Oh no, not at all.
Compared to EX1, this is just I didn't take to it nearly as well.
Right. I think like the issue with this book, as we were talking about before, is that there's not much here that is necessary that you can't get anywhere else, right? Like, I feel like this book is a reaffirmation of ideas that were already existent subtextually or textually in the main story in a way that doesn't put it as poetically or prosaically as it could. Like, I think like there's a moment where like in the plotting of, as I said, like one continuous scene, there was not like a moment where I was like, ooh, that was really well written. It was just like, this happens and then this happens and this happens and this happens. I'm like, okay, I get it. Yeah.
I think the only times I got that was Julius picking up on the playwright references and piecing together everything.
Yeah. Well, I want to mention this because I almost forgot. I like the what was it, McGree's guillotine, right? Mm-hmm. Something interesting that I caught on. I want to know what your thoughts about on this is that Sirius, because I voice her in our thing, says those lines to Priscilla. She mentions McGree's guillotine to her. I wonder if that was something that Vincent planned to save Priscilla. He did the same exact thing to her. The idea that like faking her death in order to do it.
Yeah.
And Sirius picked up on it. It was like, you are, I mean, obviously Iris, King of Thorns, agrees. Like Sirius pretty much is just saying in little words that I know exactly your history, you know, like who you are. Yeah.
I wonder if that's an added reference to her death being fake and her being
yes, well. Exactly. Yeah, it's like a double.
Oh, true.
Almost.
True.
Right?
Yeah, that's a good point. I think that's interesting because we think about it, right? The way in which Vincent acts, and it'd be interesting if this is like a parallel to that. I mean, we'll get to it in the next DX novel. Yeah. But like there's like I don't know, like I talked about this before, but like there's a slight coldness to Vincent in this book that feels right, like correct. I said before, I think this is him actualized as a character, right? We've seen this before. Only when he's challenged by like Subaru do we see a bit more of, you know, the care slipping through the cracks a bit more. Yeah, like where he's like, I know I'm just sort of playing. Like obviously he has a literal mask on in Arc 7, but like
it's not very subtle.
there's a part of him that's very compassionate, and I was wondering if like we'll get later. This is just my intuition that he does like obviously Madeline and stuff like that in Arc 7, Arc 8 happens. I do wonder what it is that we still don't know exactly about like. How okay, or maybe it'll be something he's confronted with, like a real ghost in his past where he's like, yeah, I did use Belleroy's hatred as a pawn for my own ambitions as ruler, you know. I think
finish good.
I think that's something for him to confront.
Now there is one more thing that's not necessarily involved with this book at all that I want to bring up to you two as well as a point for where we are in Arc 7. we know that Madeline cared deeply for Balleroy, even though
Yeah.
there's no reference to her here. Lop is supposedly like another one of these foster siblings, like Miles and Balleroy were, which would then go to Medium as well. But Julius has had his name eaten between this and Arc 7. So any understanding of him being the one that killed Balleroy is gone.
That's a really, really good point. I never even connected that. So yeah, so that's the reason why Madeline is like has no target for a race except for like, did you do it, King? Did you do it, Emperor? You know?
Yeah, they say it's Vincent because they're going to have like that's going to be the only understanding that's there.
True. Oh yeah, true. I
That's
thought
how
about
the
this
world is going to
because
correct it.
yes, because just like how Ram's room isn't there, it's
Yes.
just guest room. The world has to somehow fill in the blank. So it's like, oh, Julius doesn't exist. Okay, so it was actually 100%. Yeah, like he led him to his death somehow.
Well, yeah, because that would imply that the fight ends with Vincent and Felix fighting off and defeating Balleroy there.
And how the world you might think would correct that would be like, oh, Vincent just draws the fucking Yang sword and wins.
Yeah, I wonder if like even Vincent thinks he's killed Balleroy.
Oh, maybe.
You know, like he actually believes it.
No, it could even be similar to what we see with Ram in Arc 6, where it's like a literal blank, like it's blanked out, like fucking CIA documents, right?
Right.
In her brain when she thinks about it, like say for him, like
something inexplicable.
Yeah.
I wonder if that's a thing as well. Like maybe that has to do with partially, like obviously the things observers and fate and whatnot. But like I wonder if a part of him is like wondering like, is there something here that I'm missing? Like, and that's the reason why he's so curious about fate, because he's like, the way that things are responding to me don't make sense, anymore.
Yeah, he's still going to know that his plan resulted in Balleroy's death, but
so
how it went about
from in terms of responsibility, either way, Vincent led to his death, right? But it's who did the deed, right?
I mean, I don't actually think I agree with that. In the canon, or not the canon, in the original history and timeline here, Balleroy had the chance to surrender and not die.
That's
to
true.
have fulfilled Vincent's plan fully and not cost his own life. Vincent has forgiven rebellions before, clearly because Yorna is still in power.
Yeah,
and like that with it. So it's Balleroy's own desire for revenge and the need to keep pushing through is what led to his death here. And like Julius's sense of determinism and needing to do the right thing, which is stopping this.
It's interesting because obviously the idea was he was like, you won't stop even if I save you, right? Like that was what he was saying, right? And Balleroy's like, yeah, right. Thing is that like, if that, as we're talking before, like this idea that there was this chivalrous thing of like, I defeated you in battle, they both agreed, and they like, he killed them, right? That was sort of the idea. But like, if we think about this like purely logically, it's like, yeah, really Felix could have saved his life easily, right? So like
Felix had his heart shot out with a sniper bullet.
Yeah.
He healed himself.
Average Phoenix moment.
It was an agreement between both of them there that kind of, and actually I wonder if it's something that I'll touch on, because it's one of those things where like that is chivalry to them, and I wonder for somebody like Madeline who has no consensus of what humans are, if that seems like something like something inexplicable, something grisly, something like horrible about humanity. Like she's seen her entire race get wiped out. She's seen the way that they have these weird sentiments of, battle. Like I don't know if she would ever be able to understand. Like it's one of those things where it's like my love of my life got killed because he was too, prideful to accept surrender. It's like one of those things where she can't really understand.
Well, I mean,
I don't know if it's necessarily about pride. Julius is on the understanding that Balleroy isn't going to stop trying to kill his friend. Now that friend is Reinhard, right? But it still got Felix badly hurt in this exchange, so he had to stop him.
It's also a point of, in terms of Madeline's understanding, that would be the furthest thing from animal behavior possible, right? In that sense of, it's about fighting to survive, fighting to be the strongest, fighting to be on top of the food chain. Whereas, which is more of a Valachian...
Her kind of dragons are more of a superiority thing, though, not necessarily animalistic. just like they are above
above.
the rest.
That's fair. But I'm thinking here in terms of like, in that sense, chivalry as an idea, or like the honor between two combatants would be maybe a bit more of a distant idea for her, right?
Yeah, because we haven't even seen her do what was explained as like the honorable thing that two warriors do when they battle, which is explain their names before
Right.
And they're like epithets.
This here really drove that home, right? More so than almost. Yeah. I mean, that was the first like time we ever saw that, right? But like this was like, no, this is part of the world 100%. It's not just like a thing that people do randomly. It's like, no, they always do it. They always should do it.
It's not just the anime trope of, this is who I am. This is like an actual cultural thing.
Because the Sin Archbishops do it, but you're like, oh, these guys are crazy. Who knows, right? But like, no, this is just a thing that everybody does before they fight. You know?
Well, like the archbishops introduced themselves like initially. It's not like in the middle of the fight when things are getting serious.
True.
Like declare a duel, basically.
Duel.
Like Elsa against Reinhard makes a point of Elsa Reinhard, and then he calls himself the swords. Although I think they flip each other on that first one. But against Garfield, she does it when things get tense. Reinhard clearly does it twice here.
Mm-hmm.
And it's weird because like one of the things is that these are all like chivalrous duels between like this top strongest people, but we see very clearly, and this is one of those things where I'm like, I think Teppei starts to understand a bit more about the narrative of the story. We see that a lot of the people, especially those that fight Subaru, because they don't really regard him as anything significant, don't even like acknowledge him ever. They always just kill him in an underhanded way. They always just like fight him and just like everybody's brutal. Like the even the Empire's way of strength is now underhanded and like evil, like especially after the absence of Vincent. Like they just like kill and they're like, well, that's it.
And that's also what Todd represents too, if we're getting to that, right?
Oh, that's a good point. Todd does just kill at the first opportunity. That's his whole thing.
He's not, because he's not a warrior, right? He's a soldier.
I mean, he's a tool. You know, that's his.
At the end of the day, these Knights of Lagunica, they're not soldiers. They are warriors. They have that individual chivalry and pride, even if the chivalry is dead.
Both.
Right?
I think there's both.
Well, there is both. Yeah, but Todd doesn't have that, and I think he's a representative force of that sort of almost corruption of the ideal of the Empire.
Yeah, the degradation of what is their society as a whole crumbling apart. I think that's something that we'll see. I mean, one of the things they talk about the great disasters, right? In the at the end, I think the calamities. Yeah, sorry. The thing is, right? A lot of them are kind of just saying that every single nation will fall, right? And to me, I'm like, if that's the case, then like these are like this telltale signs that there is something wrong at the core of the Empire.
Rot in there, right?
Yeah.
Like there's something that's deeply broken or wrong, which is very obvious in Lagunica, right? Yeah. From everything.
Vincent knows that too. Like he doesn't follow through with a lot of the Empire's things.
Yeah, that's why he's fighting.
Still alive.
But that's also the problematic thing of him not being fully in power right now in Arc 7, right? And now him being back just now. It's a thing of like the rot has literally come through in this calamity.
People are even like resurrecting themselves from the dead. If there's nothing more perverse and ignoble than that, then like
that. Honestly, thank you. That reminded me of something I did want to ask you guys. As if you're ready to kind of wrap up, it's one final thing to.
Oh yeah,
deposit
definitely.
To you.
I'd say so.
Now that you've seen Balleroy fight, do you recognize his attack from the end of Arc 7?
It's been a while. You have to remember.
As a single beam of light that they couldn't react to that pierced straight through.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, right. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, like this invisibility, like double shot gun thing that he does. Yeah.
Like light bending, right?
I think it's really cool. I really like his power set in terms of like as like an enemy to fight. Like it is really scary. Like he's the ultimate assassin.
Oh yeah, it's terrifying.
It's also a huge threat to Subaru in particular, who would find it really difficult to combat something like that. In particular, if he gets in a death loop with him, it's gonna be so hard to get out of.
Shala all over again.
Yeah, but I would say probably a bit more precise, right?
Yeah, I mean he was able to, from a moving dragon atop the sky, aim to
in a forest
perfectly sever Vincent's arm from however far away.
Yeah, because it was
moving quick enough that Julius has to be turning around to block the incoming shots.
Yeah.
Like this guy would take an army on his own. The fact that he isn't like top 3 is astonishing with
This is
the
something-
level of power and danger he can put out.
This is something I wanted to talk about, which is like, I think, they keep on reiterating like, oh, it's about the level of strength. And I'm like, yeah, I can sort of see that, but we know that Trisha Gold is what, 4 or whatever, like at the time,
he's
5.
fourth.
Okay, 4th. Yeah. And it's like, I honestly think that the level of strength is sort of arbitrary because their personality factors in on their effectiveness.
Well,
Like, sure, like Cecilus is the strongest by far.
Cecilus and
but, like-
Arkeeping 1 and 2 is like, sure, one and done. I don't think Olbark deserves 3. I'll be honest.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I mean. It's like
Yeah.
there is a moment in which you're like, oh, the way in which these people operate. Like, for example, as you said, like Belleroy could take down an army by himself if nobody understands where he's from, right? The only thing that stops him is stamina, right? That part of it is like, oh, he could kill anybody that he wanted to, really, unless they're like Reinhard, right? Like, and even then, it's like, as Reinhard said, it's like, I'd be kind of like, obviously he wouldn't have actually, but he was like, that is kind of a scary power even for him, right?
Mhm.
And like the idea of like the effectiveness of their combat style is not really factored into their strength in ranking, I feel like.
Well, yeah, because like we see Yorna and Olbark go,
Yeah, literally,
1v1
like-
when she's fighting on the defensive in a weakened position, and it's still evenly matched.
yeah.
And isn't she 9th?
Yeah, she's like 8th now, right?
I think she
'cause
might be
didn't-
7th. Maybe?
Didn't Madeline take Belleroy's spot? I don't remember.
Yeah, she did.
Well, she takes his like place as one of the 9, but I don't remember who's ranked.
Yeah, maybe she's 9. I forget. But yeah, Yorna, she can literally mobilize an entire army by herself, an immortal army, and also never die, and also fight with the entire city, where the city is her limbs and her.
Yorna stopped Satella.
Yeah.
Yes,
in
literally.
Which
the
is crazy.
calamity happening. Yeah.
I mean, we were talking about it before, but like her power is like insane, and also like it is the perfect juxtaposition between the calamity that engulfed half the world. She was able to best it. Like, what are we talking?
The people within it. So
Yes.
if the whole world loved her, she would able to stop the
Yes.
stuff that went against the whole. Her power is theoretically infinite, but it
Yes.
just I don't get the ranking system at
Now,
all
what-
for it.
That's what I mean. Yeah.
I will make the point of, I think that could be the point, because my position on this would be, if you think it, and this is just the my understanding of the Valachian way, and the way I think Tepe is maybe positing this a little bit, even with this in a subtle way, is that pure strength is kind of arbitrary, because unless you're at the level of Reinhard or Ceci, pure strength doesn't always determine how the outcome of a fight, right? It's genuinely sometimes in terms of matchup or like how people specifically interact with each other. Strength in a lot of ways is very arbitrary, especially if you're living in a humanish society in the kind of rules of the jungle kind of vibe. There's a certain level to which that doesn't truly work in a fully 100% understandable way. Do you know what I'm trying to say? Because
Yeah, like this book didn't fully work in a truly understandable way.
Because this is just a thing of like Darwin in his works of evolution and natural selection very states that natural selection can't apply to humanity, right? Because there's a different level of like existence there. Like it's not the rules of the jungle anymore for
He's wrong.
human society.
Natural selection does still happen. It's just in a different context.
In a different context, yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, we still got to see some of the other generals. I mean, there's not really much to say.
Yeah.
Groovy was there. When I saw that Groovy was in it, I was getting ready and excited to talk to you about him. He's
There's not much
There's
there,
nothing
yeah.
to see. He swears a lot. That's kind of all you get from
I
this.
mean, I like it as a British guy. It's fun to see a character swear so much.
It's funny, man.
Yeah, it's funny. But yeah, I think that's all I had to say. We've really extended this further than I honestly thought we were going to go.
Yeah, I think this is about it. I mean, we're pontificating about stuff from the main story at this point.
Yeah.
Cool. I mean, they totally stopped a war between the two kingdoms, and nothing
He
bad.
fabricated one that wouldn't have happened.
Yep, exactly.
Well,
And nothing bad happened to any of the characters involved. And
Except Battle Royale.
then except for Battle Royale.
Bro got
And-
literally
and-
rainbow sold.
And that has no implications in the wider story whatsoever. So
Nope, zero. Definitely not. But we'll see you next time for EX5 before we jump into Arc 8, which I
Or one of those two.
yes. Oh yeah, that's true.
one again, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, but thank you so much if you have been watching up until this point. I hope you enjoyed. Tell us what you think in the comments. Tell us if we're idiots and dumb and that EX4 is actually the greatest piece of fiction ever made and we just don't understand.
Yeah, tell me why it was infinitely better when you read it before Arc 7 or 8.
Yes,
Yeah, that's actually good
is something
perspective.
I would like to hear. But yeah, goodbye!
Bye.
Bye.